Today I'm going to be showing you how to make a rug out of scraps of fabric, and you can use this same method to make other things like placemats or table runners or decorations, but it's very useful for using up tiny pieces of fabric after someone is making something, clothes, or if you have an old t-shirt that you want to throw out. So let me show you the materials that you'll need, and then we'll go through the steps to make it. So when you're ready to make your rug, you'll need to cut your material into strips, and depending on the size of the braids that you want to make, you would cut your strips of fabric thicker or thinner. And you can always double up and do two together if it's not as thick as you want it to be. So you cut your pieces of fabric, and then you'll need some thread and a needle, and that is all. So I have one that started here, and I'm going to show you how to join the fabric as you're braiding, and then I'll show you how to stitch it together. When you're ready to start your rug, you can start with 3 pieces of fabric and sew them all together, or I'm going to show you a way that you can start it without having to sew anything. So I have one piece that I'm going to use as 2. And then I have another one that's a thinner piece of fabric that I'm going to use for the 3rd. So I'm going to cross them over like that, and then fold the green one. So the green one is folded over the 2 blue, and I'm going to use it as one strand of my braid. So when I start braiding, I don't need to sew or tie anything from that point. I can just go ahead and get started. To make a braid. So this is the easiest part, is just making the braid. You can make a very long piece very quickly. The harder part is once you start to stitch it together. But it's good to make a long piece, and then once you have your long piece, you can decide whether you want your rug to be an oval or a circle. So if you want your rug to be a circle, you're going to stitch it together in a circle. So you'll just start stitching it together there, and then you curve it around to make a circle. If you want it to be more of an oval, then you can fold your piece in half to make a longer loop, and then when you start going around, it'll be more oval. So the longer of an oval you want, the longer of the pieces that you would go around. So I have my piece here that I'm working on. I used a pin just to hold it together while I'm not working on it. So I've reached the point where my fabric is almost at its end. So this is where I want to add the next piece. So what I usually do is overlap the 2 pieces and kind of wrap the old one around the new one, so that then as I braid, it will get caught in the braid. So I've added a piece there, but now the other ones are also short, so I'm going to add to this one here. And then I also need to add to this one, just like that. And then I continue to braid. So I don't even need to sew the pieces of fabric together. I'm just getting them caught together by overlapping the old one and the new one. So I just continue going. You can see that this green piece of fabric is a little bit thin, so I'm going to add another one with it so that it's heavier. And it's not a problem if you have pieces sticking out like that, because they'll get stitched into the rug once you start putting it together. So I'm going to take my my pin and stick it through here just to hold it in place, and then I'll show you how to stitch this piece onto the rest of the rug. Alright, since I braid my material together very tightly and it's a little bit hard, I like to use a thimble so that I don't poke my finger with the back of the needle pushing it through. But if you braid more loosely, or if you mostly use t-shirt type fabric, it's a lot softer and easier to push the needle through. So I've tied my thread here on the outside, and so I don't want my thread to show, so I'm just going to do the stitching from the sides of the fabric. So I start by going through all the way to the other side, and here's where it's hard. You could also use a piece of cardboard or something against your finger. Then on the other side, I want to go in and then come out a little bit further, like this. So now you can see where I went out from this side, in on the other side, and when I pull it tight, then I come to the new piece and I do the same thing. I go in. Without going all the way through, I just go across to another part of the braid. And then I push the needle through. So you can see how my thread is just in between the two sides, and when I pull it tight, it joins them together like that. So I'll do it again. On this side, I go through the side of these pieces of fabric. Then I come to the other side, and I do the same thing. Go through. That. And I pull it tight, and it joins the two pieces together like that. Once your rug is the size that you want it to be, you reach the end, you'll just want to trim your pieces of fabric so that they're the same length. So I'll trim off the end here so they're all the same length, and then I can sew them together right there, and then as I continue along the side of my rug, stitching it together, once I get to this point, I'll just sew them onto the side there, and then I'll have a nice end to my rug, like that. So one of the biggest challenges for me with making a large rug is keeping it flat. This one is still not very big, but once it starts to become really large, it's hard to keep it from being like a volcano where it's bulging here and then it gets flat and then it bulges again. So the easiest way to keep it flat is to work on a big flat surface like a table, so that as you're stitching it together, you know that you're not stretching this too much or leaving it too loose so that it becomes wavy. You can also work with it on your lap. If you fold it in half as you're stitching the side, you can kind of judge whether the halfway mark is flat or not. But the easiest way is just to use a table flat surface. For me personally, I like to mix stretchy jersey fabrics with cotton fabrics, but you could do one of just the cotton fabric or just the t-shirt jersey fabric. It doesn't matter. I also like to have the very colorful scraps, just mixing whatever I have so that I have interesting colors. But if you want it to be a specific color, then you can just use the scraps that are the color that you want. But I usually just use whatever I have left over from other projects, old t-shirts, and things that other people were going to throw away. So that's all. I hope you're able to make some beautiful things. If you wanted to make a placemat, this could be a good placemat, or if you wanted it to be thinner, you could use smaller strips of fabric. So instead of using a wide one like this, you could just cut them to be thin. this for your braids. And if you wanted it to be even bigger, you can cut your strips wider, or you can layer multiple ones for each strand of the braid. So that is all. Thank you very much.